Good evening, everyone. So you saw that announcement that we are recording this meeting. So if you're uncomfortable with it, please make sure you either to get off camera or just so you can leave the meeting as well. There's an option there. So thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Tazeen Ahmed. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club. And we are a membership organization of politically active women and men working to advance democratic policy priorities and to elect Democrats up and down the ballot. Our goal is to elect Democrats who prioritize the well-being of women and their families. And that means educating, advocating for effective, equitable laws and policies for a healthy, resilient community. WDC has been around for over 65 years, and we hold many important events, including speaker series, community education panels, candidate panel forums, legislative advocacy, get out the vote events, happy hours. And there's so many opportunities for you to get involved in what we do. Here is a list, quick look at our committees. Could we change the slide? So these are the different committees that, okay. Do you want to go back one slide just for a second, please? So these are the different committees that any one of you can get involved in. If you're interested, you can reach out and look at our website for more information. A quick look at our executive committee. I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I apologize for that. But this is our executive committee. We hold biannual elections. So we're in the middle of close to the end of the first year of this term, and we will hold elections again in 2025. Next slide, please. So we have a very robust, speakers that we have that attend our events and come and speak to our members. Some of you know that Eleanor Roosevelt and First Lady Jill Biden have both spoken to WDC members in the past. And today we have another amazing woman that you will be hearing from in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Some of our upcoming events. So we have an event with Sarah Bloom Raskin. It's going to happen on, April 18th. And it's a happy hour at 6:30 at Los Churros restaurant. She is the Special United States Environmental Consultant. So we're going to come and spend an hour or so with us and talking about the climate, the environment, and net zero. There's a registration link on our website, so please consider joining. And we'll put the links in the chat as we move along. So anything you're interested in, you can click on. The other event that we have is our District 6 Democratic Congressional Candidates Forum. It's going to be moderated by Brian Karam, who's a columnist at Salon.com and host of Just Ask the Question podcast. He was also White House correspondent for many years. That will be held at Seneca Valley High School Auditorium on April 28th from 2:30 to 5. So please register. We really need to make sure that we have a strong set of candidates going in to the general election from the primary. So you need to do your homework so we make sure that happens. So register, pass on the information. Next slide, please. We have two other events coming up. You'll see more details about it. We have the annual Tommy Raskin speaker event on May 13th and the maternal health webinar on May 22nd. And there's going to be much more things going on as we move ahead this year. And you all know this is a really important year with the election coming up. This meeting, as I told you in the beginning, is being recorded. If you have questions, you can submit it to the chat via Q&A. There will be opportunity for you to ask questions in the later part of this session. So just keep that in mind. And if you have your questions ready, we'll go from there. So now I am very excited to introduce our guest tonight, Barbara McQuade. Barbara is a legal analyst for NBC News and MSNBC and a co-host of the podcast #Sisters-in-Law. She served as a U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan from 2010 to 2017, appointed by President Barack Obama, and the first woman to hold that position. previously a sports writer and a copy editor. She served as a judicial law clerk, an associate in a private practice, and an assistant U.S. attorney. She's also professor from practice at the University of Michigan Law School, teaching criminal law, criminal procedure, national security, and data privacy courses. As part of Donald Trump's 2017 dismissal of U.S. attorneys, she stepped down in March 2017. Her book, Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America, which is what we will be talking, this is her first book, which was published on February 27, 2024, and that's what we will be talking with her today. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. And I have to say, you have the best graphics of any organization I've spoken to. Those are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for being here tonight. I'm really honored that you're here. And thank you to Tazeen, everybody on your board, and who invited me to this event. I'm really honored to be here. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And one thing I forgot to mention, when the last slide, I think I just skipped it, was that we have there is a link, going to be a link in the chat where people can buy your book. So for those of you who didn't see that, it's in the chat. We will provide a link, and there's a discount from Politics and Prose. And I know that you were here in Politics and Prose. I missed that. I regretted missing it, but we will make it available so people can pick up the book at that point. So should we get started? It's such an honor to have you here today. Thank you for making time to come and join us. So your book provides a very thorough assessment of the information war that's being waged in America. And it traces it. It's very systematically, you trace it back to disinformation from its inception to modern time. We talk about Mussolini and Hitler and how, a lot of the techniques that they use are now being reused. And, I found it downright frightening, how easily history seems to be able to repeat itself, despite all the lessons, we think we've learned. Can you talk a little bit about the thesis of the book and about why you wanted to write it?
Yes. Well, the thesis of the book is that disinformation is not just some, harmless thing that we ought to shrug at. It is harming our democracy. It is harming public safety, and it is harming the rule of law. And that is because there is an authoritarian movement afoot to take power away from the people in this country. And although technology has really amplified disinformation and has made it so easily accessible, these are old tactics. It is just a new way of delivering them to us. And to me, the biggest challenge isn't necessarily the people who are fooled by the disinformation, but by the people who are willing to go along with the con to advance their own political agendas. And so why did I choose to write about this book? This, at my core, I am a national security prosecutor. I spent the bulk of my career as a national security prosecutor. And so I have seen different threats emerge as the most serious threat to American national security, starting with Al-Qaeda after 9/11, moving on to ISIS, moving on to Russia, moving on to cyber. And now I think the greatest threat to our national security is from our own people in the form of domestic terrorism and disinformation. And so I teach a course in national security at Michigan Law School. And since about 2018, one of the assignments I've given to my students is to read the Mueller report, and not so much to focus on what Robert Mueller did or did not find regarding Donald Trump, but what Robert Mueller revealed about Russian disinformation tactics, because it is so revealing how the Russian Internet Research Agency used social media accounts to spread disinformation, to influence the election, and to stoke divisions in society. It was a fabulously successful campaign, and we have seen Americans take a page out of that book and use it to their own advantage. And so I wanted to write a book to reveal what I have been seeing and studying since 2018 in a book that is accessible to ordinary readers, so that we can identify these tactics, we can name them, and I hope thereby defeat them.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the way you've written the book, it's laid out so simplistically, but it's so deep also. So it's really it's it's so easy to read, but it really drives home the points that you're trying to make. So you've done a wonderful job with that.
Thank you.
Um,
And Tazeen, I must compliment you on the product placement. If you look right over Tazeen's shoulder, you will see the book on her shelf prominently displayed. I'm very pleased to see that. Thank you.
and I highly recommend the book. I think all of us should read it and know what's in that. So it's really an important read. So one thing you talk about the book is how disinformation and misinformation in America are distorting our perception of reality. In that, while many of us think that those are just two words that could be interchangeable, they actually mean something different according to what you've written. So can you talk about the difference between the words and why they are such powerful tools in advancing some of these political agendas that we're seeing?
Yes, so you do hear a lot of people use the two terms interchangeably. I just isolate them as different words because I think they have different meanings, and I use them throughout the book in different ways. And so to me, disinformation is the deliberate use of lies and misleading claims to deceive or manipulate people. That's disinformation. Misinformation is kind of its unwitting cousin. When some of us hear disinformation and we believe it to be true, and then we pass it on to others and thereby amplify the claim. I'll give you an example of a time I myself fell for a false claim online and I passed on misinformation. I'm a big sports fan, and I saw an article online that said Patrick Mahomes, the star NFL quarterback, was refusing to play another down for the Kansas City Chiefs until they changed their name to something that was not offensive to Native Americans. And I thought, wow, putting his money where his mouth is. That's amazing. I got very excited to see that, and I retweeted that and passed it on and sent it out there. And then later that day, I raised it with my husband and my son. I said, did you guys see that story about Patrick Mahomes? How about it? And they said, no, what story? What are you talking about? And they hadn't heard anything about it. And I said, oh, this has got to be big news. Of course you've heard about this. So I went back on my phone and I said, it must be true because I read it on Twitter. Oh, and that made me think I better find out what the source was. And I found the original tweet, and it came from ESPN, legitimate, credible source. But when I read the fine print on the account, it was put out by something called Sprots Center, not Sports Center, but a made up fake account called Sprots Center. So I took my tweet down, but it was a great lesson in how easy it is to see something, especially something that gets you a little bit excited or appeals to your emotions, and how easy it is. You want to share that news with other people. And so that to me was a great example of how misinformation can be amplified. And so, one of the things that psychologists know, that Facebook knows based on their strategy, is we are more likely to engage with material when we're angry and we're outraged. And so the things that get us amped up are things that are get us very excited. Now, I wasn't angry about the Patrick Mahomes thing. I was kind of excited about it. But things where we have an emotional reaction. And so that's what Russia did. It's what others are doing. It's what Steve Bannon suggests, which is just amping everybody up by falsely appearing to be a member of a group. Perhaps I will pretend to be a Christian, and I will say things that are just horrific about other groups. I might make horrible claims about Jewish people or Muslim people or other things. And the reason that the fake account does that is to make Jewish people and Muslim people angry at the Christian they believe are saying those things. Or I might pretend to be someone who is a member of the LGBTQ community, and I'll say all kinds of outrageous things in support of that community so that others see that and think, look at how outrageous these people are. And so that's the goal, to stoke division in society, to find all of the fault lines, whether it's race, abortion, affirmative action, immigration, whatever it is, guns. And I'm going to pose as somebody advocating for one side or the other. And I'm going to say the most hateful, outrageous things you can imagine so that the opponents of that issue will get really ramped up and angry and will start responding in kind. That is what Russia's strategy was, to sow division in society. And I believe it's a strategy that Donald Trump and his MAGA movement have tried to capitalize on by getting us dividing people, getting us amped up and angry with each other, creating scapegoats in society and telling people the reason things are bad in society is because of these other people, in an effort to claim victory by those people who support his image of America.
No, and I think absolutely, and I think that part of the one of the things that I read in your book is there's these things that will just hold the hateful stuff all the time, but there are others, that accounts that sort of create, they are sort of creating a group where they are creating relationships with people, and all at the very end where it's positive, like there's positive reinforcements and positive ideas, and at the very end, near election time, they will come out and try and influence people in another way. So yeah. I guess they're both ways that they're doing that.
Yeah, and I'll just give you an example of that. I mean, Robert Mueller goes into great detail in his report about Russian disinformation. And he talks about how for many, many months, these members of the Internet Research Agency, Russian operatives, would create accounts with names like Blacktivist that portrayed themselves as a Black political activist who said smart, normal, reasonable things and attracted a lot of followers. They also boosted the engagement with that account with paid ads so that it reached more people and cultivated a huge following of followers. Same with United Muslims of America and Tennessee GOP and Heart of Texas, all of these accounts that looked like real people who had, an affinity with certain groups. And they'd say all these things and they would gather all of these followers. And then, as you say, Blacktivist, for example, just before the election said, Hillary Clinton has never done anything for our community. We should take a stand and send a powerful message that we will not be ignored. We will not be taken for granted by not showing up at the polls for her. Now, you'll never know how many people actually heeded that call and believed it to be true. But if even only a small number of people believed it and followed that advice, and they were voting in a swing state with a small margin of victory, it could have made a difference in the outcome of election. And they were doing it not just with Blacktivists, but with United Muslims of America and Tennessee GOP and Heart of Texas and all of these other things to get people to think that their friend that they've been following all this time had just said this thing that, this person has a lot of credibility for them. So it's incredibly insidious how anonymous accounts online can be used to deceive people.
So I'd like to just talk a little bit about disinformation and authoritarianism. Mm-hmm. And in the first chapter of the book, you cite a woman at the Trump rally in Pennsylvania who told a reporter, this was a quote, there's only two teams, Team Jesus and Team Lucifer, and it's very easy to pick a side. So, when people are just thinking in those terms, it's black and white, it's either, it's really terrifying for them to have those comparisons. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, some of the tactics that have been used by authoritarians throughout history, Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, are the same tactics that we are seeing used today by Donald Trump and others of his ilk. And it's not just him. Carrie Lake is another one who follows this playbook. Ron DeSantis was one who followed this playbook. And I'll describe just a few of the techniques. So the one you're describing is something referred to as the either or fallacy. And that is, it's a debater's trick. And I am going to create the illusion that there are only two choices for anything in this world. There is that other side. And then I'm going to portray the other side as so awful, so untenable, that I will make it a choice that you will completely vote against. And that will leave you only with me. And you'll think, I don't love Donald Trump. I don't like his mean tweets. I don't like how undignified he is. But that other side is so awful. They want to defund the police. They want to open our borders to everyone who wants to come in. They want to lock down our country during COVID. And they're lying to us about what that is. So, if you believe there are only two choices and the other choice is evil, then it's easy to choose, even if you think that the other guy isn't perfect. So that's a trick. Another one is the idea of declinism. And this is another one that we heard throughout history. Hitler, after World War I, talked about, the economy in Germany was poor, how bad everything is. It's a great national shame. These are awful times, and desperate times call for desperate measures. And then you can scapegoat other people and say, and the reason everything is so bad is because of these other people. For Hitler, it was Jewish people. Let's blame them for everything that's bad in society. You see Donald Trump doing the exact same thing. Just yesterday on Truth Social, he posted, I had it up here for a minute, all caps, of course, "Our once great country is going down the drain. We are a nation in decline. Vote for Donald J. Trump. We are going to make America great again." I mean, that is right out of the Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin playbook. We're going downhill. Everything's bad. American carnage. American cities in ruins. In fact, if you look at most measures, America's doing pretty well. Crime is down. Wages are way up. Unemployment is way down. We do have inflation, but if anybody studied economics, the reason we have inflation is because wages are up and the economy is booming. So, things need to be done to adjust that. But by all measures, American society is actually doing pretty well. Of course, it's not perfect. We have our problems. There are things we need to solve, but we can't solve it with this idea of political purity, that it's all or nothing, that it's one or the other, because the way we actually solve problems is through compromise. And instead, it's easy to stand on the sidelines and complain. It's much harder to govern, as we saw when Donald Trump served as president. So this idea of declinism, this idea of scapegoating, right? For Hitler, it was Jewish people. For Trump and his ilk, it is immigrants, right? Talking about calling them animals, calling them vermin, talk about how they're poisoning the blood. I mean, that's Hitler stuff right there, poisoning the blood. The blood of whom? What exactly does that mean? It is this idea of the superior white race that is being tainted by the blood of others, which is a deeply offensive concept. The idea of repetition. If I repeat something enough times, people will believe it to be true. So a stolen election, stop the steal. People hear it from each other. They hear it from Trump. They hear it online. They hear it in their echo chambers. They hear it from their friends and neighbors and politicians and leaders. And eventually they believe it to be true. This is something that Hitler wrote about in Mein Kampf. Simple, easy themes, easily repeated slogans that you can repeat again and again. One of his was Lügenpresse, which meant lying press. He knew that if he could undermine the press, then people wouldn't believe them when they were critical of him. For Donald Trump, of course, it is enemy of the people. Short, easy, repeatable phrases that people begin to believe just because they've heard them so much. And one final tactic I'll mention is that when you lie, you should go big. Hitler, of course, wrote in Mein Kampf that everybody tells small lies from time to time. We might, lie to our friends. My sister might tell me my hair looks nice, even when it doesn't. My husband might say, well, no, dear, that dress doesn't make you look fat. But we say these things out of a place of kindness, right? Or courtesy. We all tell white lies to be kind. And so what Hitler wrote is, all of us tell white lies, but most of us cannot imagine having the audacity to tell a lie about something of great significance. And we project onto others the same moral compass that we could never imagine that anyone else would lie about these very big things. I talk about in the book, Tazeen, the prosecution of a doctor who lied to his patients about having cancer. And his patients wouldn't believe it, because who would lie about a thing like that? Who could possibly lie about something so significant? And that is what actually makes it believable. The bigger the lie, ironically enough, the more believable it is. So these are tactics as old as time. Trump uses them and others. And I am hopeful that if we can see through them and identify them, we can, be less manipulated by them.
I hope that's true. But so one of the things that you talk about in chapter 5 is you talk about why America is particularly vulnerable to disinformation. And on page 142, you say, when it comes to disinformation, a number of distinctly American virtues are also our vulnerabilities, which I thought was interesting. Can you elaborate on that? And what did you mean?
Well, one is our diversity. I think it is one of the greatest strengths of our country. Why do we do so well in the Olympics? It's because we have all kinds of people. We have big people, small people, fast people, strong people. It is the great strength of our country. And yet it is what allows people to drive wedges between groups in society, divide and conquer. If we were all homogeneous, it would be harder to divide and conquer. But instead, you can draw lines between divisions and try to defeat people and push people out and push other people in. A way to attract lower economic, lower educated white people is by trying to boost their self-esteem and make them feel better than people who came to this country after they did, whether it's immigrants or minorities or other people. And so that's where this idea of, the great replacement, they're trying to replace you, can really stoke fear. So what I see as a great strength, our diversity, is used by some to manipulate us, to push us and pit us against each other. Another thing that I think is great about America is our right to free speech. Free speech is something that I think is cherished on the left and the right. It is what gives us power to speak out against our government. And so because everyone cherishes it so much, we all shrivel and recoil in horror when anyone accuses us of censorship. And I think the word censorship has been weaponized to some extent. Whenever there's a proposal to do any kind of regulation online, the tech companies will accuse any lawmaker of engaging in censorship. When we tried to set up at the Department of, when I say we, I just mean the United States, when the United States Department of Homeland Security tried to create an agency for disinformation to monitor disinformation coming in from overseas, it was criticized immediately. The executive director, a researcher named Nina Jankowicz, received all kinds of death threats and was called a censor. And people accused it of being the censorship bureau. Senator Marsha Blackburn wrote a letter saying this is American censorship. And they disbanded in 11 days. That was as long as they lasted. And I think, the Biden administration's been a little bit scared of standing up to disinformation for fear of these accusations of engaging in censorship. There's a case before the Supreme Court right now attacking the Biden administration for just talking to social media companies and saying, hey, Facebook or Twitter, people are posting stuff about quack theories for curing COVID that are very dangerous. They're telling people to drink bleach. You need to take that down because it's really dangerous to people. I think it violates your terms of service, Facebook. And Facebook says, oh, you're right. Thank you. We'll take that down. There's a lawsuit that says that's illegal because that's censorship. It's nonsense. But I think because we all so value the First Amendment, we're even afraid of being accused of censorship. And it's preventing us from speaking out when we see these false claims, even those that might endanger Americans' public safety.
So you started off as a journalist. And I think, so what do you think that journalists could do to fight off disinformation? And also, what do you think in terms of the demise of the small newspapers? Is that contributing significantly to the problem as well?
I do. I think it's part of the problem. There used to be a phrase, I think it was Tip O'Neill, who said all politics is local. And now it seems like most politics is national. And I think it's because we've lost a lot of visibility into our local politics. Now, you folks are probably super engaged there in Montgomery County and have your hand on the pulse of all the things that are going on locally. But I think about my own community, and we spend a lot of time talking about politics at the national level and much less talking about things that actually probably affect us far more, like, our state budget, our state tax policy, or our local school board issues, local city council, the road commission. And that's because we don't have a lot of local news coverage of that anymore. We used to have a lot of local newspapers that would cover these things. And so now we have a couple blogs that cover this stuff of unknown credibility. And so I think that creates a void. And so instead we have people talking about issues at the national level where all we know is what we read. We don't have the opportunity to have firsthand experience about those things. And so it makes us susceptible to disinformation about those things. And I also think that local media is something that brings community together. I think one of the reasons we're so at each other's throats is we're not out in the real world interacting with people enough. I mean, you folks are engaged in this organization, so you are the choir to whom I am preaching. But I think local newspapers help build community because we know when the local kid won a prize at the science fair, and it's a topic of bringing community together. It's we can write about the high school sports championship ends up in the local paper, and it's a point of pride that people can talk about. Just, local activities, all of the things that are going on in a community, I think are built in large part by local newspapers. And so losing local newspapers, I do think, creates some void there. And it is part of this business model that wants to extract every penny of profit that it can from every business, whether it's hospital consolidation, bank consolidation, or news media. That is certainly a problem. But you asked, what can journalists do about this? And I do think journalists can be part of the solution. And I think there are a few things that we need to think about. One is we should fund local journalism. And I think that can be done through grants and foundations. I serve on the board of some foundations in Detroit, and I'm amazed at their resources and their level of ability to contribute to things. And so, funding local journalists, I think, is something that could be done through foundation communities. And I think that would be helpful. I think newspapers need to be more responsible in the headlines they write for their articles. The headlines are clickbait. The headlines say things that barely resemble the story. A lot of people read just the headline and they share it with a friend or a loved one, and the story doesn't say anything at all about what might be in the headline. It might say thousands of eyeballs fried in the eclipse, and then you read the article and it will say that's what didn't happen on Monday because everyone wore their glasses. So if you were to read the headline, you'd have just the exact opposite idea of what the article actually said. So I think that's one thing they need to have some more discipline about. I think the other thing they need to do is stop putting, I don't know about you, but I look at our local paper, the Detroit News and the Detroit Free Press, online. And when I look online, I'll see all the stories lined up there. And in addition, they'll have what they call sponsored content that is nestled right in there with the stories. And it looks just like a story. In the old days in a newspaper, you could tell what was an ad and what was a story. And now they want you to click on that link before you open it and realize, oh, this was an ad. Like I write about one in the book that I got like while I was writing it. And it was something like, if you eat oatmeal for breakfast every day, this could happen to you. And I do eat oatmeal for breakfast every day because it micro-targets me and it knows that. So I clicked on it and it was like nothing, like you'll be healthy or something, something ridiculous like that. But it gets nestled in. And I think what it does is it confuses people about what is news and what is not. And I think it causes people to become very jaded about what is actual news. And, part of this is not believing anything. Like I've lost faith in the truth. I've lost faith in what is news, and I'm exhausted. And so I don't know what to believe anymore. So I think that undermines news. I also think one challenge we have right now is paid news content versus non-paid. I don't know about you, but I subscribe to a lot of newspapers online. I read the Washington Post. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read the New York Times, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press. It's kind of expensive. Like I don't want to encounter those paywalls. So I pay to subscribe with an annual digital subscription for all these newspapers. It's kind of expensive. And so I think we are creating a knowledge gap between those who are willing to subscribe and those who are not. For some people, it's just not affordable. So all of us are likely reading the Washington Post or, other newspapers and are fairly, well informed about the news. How about people who are not reading any of those things? All they're watching is Fox News, and that's their source of news because it's free and it's on TV and I like what they have to say. They are not as informed as the rest of us. So how do we solve that? And I don't know. One solution, potential solution, would be to give everybody an equal number of credits that are subsidized by the government or foundations, newspaper foundations, that we can use to pay for our news. Because, I think it's dangerous to have the government funding news outlets directly. But if they fund us and we can use that currency to pay for these news, news can't be free. We've lost the ad models that we had previously. And so if we need to pay for our news, then maybe we can find other sources to help us pay for that. So I think that's one thing that they can do. But I also think the news media can be part of the solution. Really, I think they still haven't quite figured out how to cover Donald Trump. They do too much of this both sidesing stuff. And I think they need to call out these authoritarian tricks. And I think they need to label lies as lies. And I think, in 2016, they got a lot of flack for giving him free airtime. In 2020, I think in 2024, I think they're doing maybe just the opposite. And they are not giving him a microphone. But I think a lot of people don't know some of the really outrageous things that he's saying. a news report might report about one thing they said that's reasonably normal, but they aren't hearing about all of these, I want to be a dictator for a day, and there's going to be a bloodbath, and some really awful things that he is saying that I think the people need to hear so that they can assess that. And reporters, I think, need to call out lies, and not think about, they were trained in the old days of this. We present both sides and we allow readers to decide for themselves the conclusion. I don't think you can both sides it when one side is an authoritarian.
But I think that's the fine line they walk, right? If you keep pointing it out, then you're just giving him more and more, sort of publicity.
It's really hard.
And
I don't know. Yeah,
it's a hard call a lot of times for those newsrooms. So do you think that the younger generation is better at siphoning out disinformation, or misinformation? Is there a cause for optimism with our younger folks, or are they in the same boat as us?
Yeah, yes and no. My law students, who are mostly in their 20s, seem pretty savvy. They are mostly digital natives. They read social media, but they also read newspapers. They seem pretty savvy, and I think they can spot these things. I worry about the next generation behind them. I've got my own children who spend a lot of time on TikTok and on Instagram, looking at pictures. I had a student the other day, undergraduate student, say she gets all of her news from Instagram. And that's really troubling to me because all she's seeing is what influencers are choosing to share with her. One of the important things I think about news media is that they are gatekeepers. They are deciding not only the facts, but they're also helping us to assess what has news value. If you trust the Washington Post to assess what has news value, or the librarian at your public library, what gets put in front of you are the things that matter, and things that you can ignore are not put in front of you. If instead all you follow are celebrities who are, Taylor Swift and Beyonce and professional athletes, I don't know that you're getting, you might be getting accurate information, but I think you're missing a lot of important information. And I worry about that. I have also been reading about a Russian disinformation group that has been labeled doppelganger. It's not what they call themselves, but there's a disinformation group in the EU that studies them. And one of the things they've been doing is they're very savvy. They are using images of celebrities like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and soccer superstars, and they are putting fake social media posts that are anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia, to defeat the war, defeat Ukraine in the war. And it looks pretty good. And so people see that and they think, oh, Taylor Swift thinks Vladimir Zelensky is a loser. Huh, who knew? And that it's actually quite effective because young people don't know the difference. So I don't know. I think one of the things we need to do, Tazeen, is to educate everybody, and that includes young people, in media literacy. And so I think that's one thing that can be part of the solution here. I think, doing some regulation of social media, I think, is an important part of the equation. But I think one thing we can do to build resilience is to teach young people and people of all ages how some of these tricks work. Just some of the really basic things like don't believe a headline. You read the story before you pass something on, and don't just read the headline. The headline is likely to be very unreliable. Get a second source, as I failed to do with my Patrick Mahomes example, before you pass something on or believe it to be true, especially if it's something, controversial, significant. Look for another source and see if it's there. One place where there's a lot of disinformation is in science and medicine, with anti-vax and all kinds of things. And people will cite these studies. And if you're going to look at a study, be sure to at least understand the how persuasive it ought to be. What was the sample size of the people in this study? Was it 2,000 people or was it 2? Because that can make a difference in terms of whether these conclusions are credible. Understanding the difference between correlation and causation. Sometimes you see these studies that say things like 90% of all children who have dinner with their parents will graduate on time from high school. And then, the takeaway is, therefore, you should have dinner with your kids and they'll graduate on time from high school. There's correlation, but I'm not sure it's necessarily causation. right? Because kids who have dinner with their parents are probably also living in a stable household. They're food secure. They likely have parents involved in their lives. So they got a lot of good things going for them. It isn't so necessarily like, the dinner's probably part of it, but probably only a small part of it. So understanding those differences, I think, can be really important. In Finland, they have introduced media literacy in their schools with great success. Finland, which neighbors Russia, has been bombarded with disinformation for decades. And so to help people in Finland understand and spot these lies, they have introduced it into the schools, and it has been very successful. So perhaps that's something we can do here. And, to reach the rest of us who are out of school, then groups like yours, civic groups, faith communities, I think are a place. There's a huge network of retiree education, I have learned. I know it because they're inviting me to do book talks. All of you might be too young to be members of these things, but they're great. Like the University of Michigan has a retiree organization where they do lifelong learning. There's OLLI lifelong learning, Osher lifelong learning, SOAR lifelong learning. And it's great. It's, retirees who want to, show up once a month and learn something, lunch and learns. So I think there are a lot of ways we could help provide media literacy that could help people maybe, be skeptical and see through some of these things.
Thank you. So I just have one more question. I want to just open it up to some of the questions in the audience. But on page 249, and some of it you've sort of covered, but you say disinformation will hamper our ability to solve challenges like climate change, pandemics, and wealth disparities. Raw power will replace the rule of law. Discredited and weaponized civilian law enforcement and courts will lose their legitimacy, leading to crime and corruption. So it's a pretty gloomy picture of what could happen. But yeah, you go on to say the good news is most problems created by humans can be solved by humans. So could you just talk just to close out this part of it? What are the potential, solutions? And like I said, you've talked about some of them.
Yes. So, I wanted to what's the worst that can happen? And that's it, right? I described it, which is we no longer live in a society that is, the rule of law, that those with the most power, the physical power, financial power, political power, will dictate what happens, and courts will be a joke. They'll be gone, and just people with power will tell us what to do and what we get to do. And that's the horror movie. But I think that we can solve real problems. I mean, my gosh, we put a man in the moon. We can do all kinds of things. And I think I've already talked about media literacy, which is one thing. I think there are a number of things we can do to regulate social media. In an interest of keeping some time for questions, I won't go into them in detail, but I think we can regulate the algorithms that are designed to generate outrage. I think we can remove bots, the AI-generated fake accounts that amplify false accounts. I think we could even possibly require verified accounts so that we couldn't have these anonymous accounts with Blacktivist and United Muslims of America pretending to be people they are not. So I think there's some governmental things we could do to reduce this. But mostly, I think we need to call out those who are going along with the con. I think to be a great patriot in the United States requires an honest, candid conversation and truth, even when it goes against our own political side. And, we see this from time to time, people who are willing to, say things because they believe it favors the interest. I'm going to decide that I favor abortion rights. And so any issue that comes along, I'm going to reverse engineer my thinking to tell you how I feel about this particular issue. We have to be, truthful. We have to be honest, all of us. And I think we have to define patriotism as truth and call out all of these people who are being so unpatriotic and going along with the con. People like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who voted against certifying the election. These are Ivy League educated lawyers who most certainly knew better. We've got Donald Trump calling the January 6th attackers hostages, who were, they're criminal defendants. They were insurrectionists. And we've got people like Elise Stefanik, member of Congress from New York, repeating that phrase, hostages, and Marjorie Taylor Greene calling them hostages now. We got to call that out. And, I don't care what your political preference is, but we cannot, as Liz Cheney said, we cannot remain a free country without truth.
Thank you. So I think can we go back to the, have everyone to show everyone on the screen, and we'll try and take questions. If you could raise your hand, we'll try and get as many questions as possible. So if you raise your hand, I can just look around the screen and see who's actually, I do not see any raised hands. I'm sure they're there. Can you see? Oh, Joanne.
I see a couple.
I see Joanne. You want to go ahead, Joanne?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm over here.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Steve Bannon not in jail?
Oh,
Convicted
you.
and
What a
he was
great
given
question.
jail time.
Yep. No, it's a great question. So as you all probably know, Steve Bannon was convicted of contempt of Congress for refusing to testify before the January 6th committee. He violated the subpoena. He had a trial. He was convicted. Ordinarily, when someone is convicted of a crime, even if they appeal, they go to prison while that appeal is pending. Peter Navarro, who was convicted of the very same crime of contempt of Congress in the same proceeding, was sentenced, got the same sentence, by the way, I think it was 5 months, and he's in prison. And somehow the judge in the Bannon case certified the case. So the presumption is you go to prison, you're sentenced, something like 90% of criminal convictions are affirmed on appeal. So there's a presumption that that ruling is good until another judge says it's not. So typically people begin serving their sentence. A judge, however, may delay a sentence if he or she believes that the case involves serious questions of law that could be reversed on appeal, especially when there's a short sentence, because he only got 5 months. And so it's likely that the appeal would take longer than 5 months. And so it could be that his conviction gets reversed at, month 7, and he will have served his 5 months, with that, and should not have, and you can never give him those 5 months back. Guess what happens to every other defendant in the criminal justice system? They serve those 5 months or whatever it is, just like Peter Navarro. So it's very strange to me that a judge did find that there was this significant question of law. The issue he raised is that his testimony was protected by executive privilege because at one time he served as a White House advisor, even though he was not a White House advisor at the time he was called to testify, or even during the time relevant, January 6, 2021, to the inquiry. So it strikes me as a very weak legal claim. So I think, why is he in jail? Because a judge said so, but I don't think it's a very good decision.
So our next question, Hala Ayala.
Hi, Barbara. How are you? Thank
Hello,
you.
I'm well. Hello.
That's awesome. I work in national security. I've done this for, 20 to 25 years, I should say. And it's just been very, very interesting to see how, the evolution of
Yes.
network security and data and AI, like the agencies are really fighting and contemplating policies now. To your earlier point, I know that you have, you touch on it in your book. And what frustrates me as somebody who's been elected to office and tried to create policy and legislation around regulation or good GDPR, things that you're talking about, and I'm putting a lot of background to this. But my question is, what can Congress do? We have big tech that stands up against this. You have testimonies like Facebook and big, just so many people that influence the outcome of legislation when we're going into an age where we may not ever recognize what is fact from fiction.
Yeah.
So what would be, I guess my question would be, with all that is, and taking that into as much context as possible, what would you recommend for Congress to do and the president to do? I know he's putting a lot of policy out there for cyber, but disinformation is going to, be, and it already is prominent in our spaces of how we access information, and we can't tell. I have a girlfriend who sends me information all the time. I'm like, stop clicking on this. It's going to send you false information all the time. Your algorithms are messed up. And she won't listen to me. she's already been brainwashed by it. So I start sending her pictures of dogs to try to
Yeah,
change, to
It's so
change the
funny you say that.
algorithm.
I was just somewhere else where, people said, like, let's just talk about puppies.
Yeah, let's just talk about puppies, let's talk about flowers. I'm trying to change her algorithm without telling her that, which is crazy, right? Like it's you can't be honest.
Yeah.
I'm just very fearful for our children when it comes to our textbooks, the banning of textbooks, just all that
Yes.
is.
Oh, I know. It's amazing. Well, thank you. First, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I certainly don't have all the answers. I think number one, we need to have a national conversation about truth and a commitment to truth, because there are plenty of people who are trafficking in lies, and finding that that's just fine with them because they are using it to get what they want. I think, though, in terms of what can government do, we saw the Biden administration try to do some things, but I think they've been a little bit weak. I think they have kind of quivered in fear a little bit when they get called censors. Sometimes when an administration is facing re-election, they get a little skittish. I would hope that once the Biden administration is re-elected, they might have a little more backbone to be able to do more, like with a disinformation agency that is actually studying this. We've seen disinformers go after not only this federal agency, but a lot of academics who are studying disinformation. Stanford's got a big outfit that studies disinformation, and people have been attacking them as, again, censors and wanting to defund them and other kinds of things. So I think, and this jawboning where there's the Supreme Court case about whether the administration can even alert social media companies when there's something dangerous online. Like, you just got to do that. Like, have a backbone, right? Just you got to have some nerve there. But I do think Congress can do some things. You're right about how they have these hearings and they'll get all spun up where Mark Zuckerberg will be there and Jack Dorsey and all these tech bros will be sitting there in front of the members of Congress, and some member of Congress will have like some really nice question written by some aide, and they'll ask the question, and then one of these tech guys will answer it and start talking about algorithms and data and all kinds of stuff, and you'll see the eyes glaze over in the member of Congress. They start, they remind me of those, you ever see those progressive ads about becoming your parents? I'm at that age where it hits a little too close to home, but they look like that. Like, am I hashtagging right now? I think it sometimes feels like, if you're national security, you've probably experienced this. I'm going to talk at you with a lot of acronyms and big words, and I'm going to scare you and make you think you can't possibly understand this. And they can do this. They can hire experts. They can figure this out, regulating the algorithms so that they are not pushing false content or content designed to outrage, regulating bots, regulating anonymous accounts online, preventing them from scraping our personal data so that they can micro-target us and send ads or polling information or political ads right at us, requiring the disclosure of who paid for ads online. Currently, they don't have to do that. And I also think we need some massive reforms for campaign finance. The Citizens United Supreme Court case from 2010 allows, corporations and organizations and super PACs to not, all they need is the name of their super PAC. The United Grandmothers of America. We don't know who it is, but it's some special interest behind it, and they have unlimited amounts of funds that they can spend on political campaigns as long as they don't coordinate with the candidate. So they can say all kinds of bad things about Joe Biden and all kinds of good things about Donald Trump, and we never know who they are. Citizens United is not going to get overturned in our lifetime, I don't think, but I think we could require disclosure of who's behind those super PACs. So at least we know if it's, V. Putin who is actually paying for these ads, as opposed to the United Grandmothers of America. So I list a lot of ideas in my book. I think many of them are really attainable, but we need to have the political will to do it. And I'm hopeful that, I think right now the Biden administration and members of Congress are just fighting for their political lives, just fighting for re-election to have, the political power to govern. And then I'm hopeful that maybe we can get some of these things done.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So Gina, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing you. Thanks for coming to speak to us. I, too, have been incredibly troubled by the use of the First Amendment as this shield against what I perceive as falsehoods. And I wonder if you could, as a law professor, get into some of the details about what the First Amendment
Yeah.
actually protects and what it doesn't protect,
Yes,
so that I can feel like I have something to say
yes.
when I'm dealing with this.
It's a
Thank
great
you.
question, Gina, and I will equip you to answer that question. So people are very fond of saying you're violating my First Amendment rights anytime there's any restriction whatsoever. You know, Donald Trump has been getting these gag orders, which are very common in high profile criminal cases, and saying the judge is violating my First Amendment rights. They're trying to silence me, my free speech rights. Like any right, First Amendment rights have to be read in the context of the whole document of the Constitution, right? You don't just read any one part in isolation. And so there is also a duty for the government to provide for the common defense. And so that means the government does have some room to regulate speech when it might harm public safety. The key test that is referred to as strict scrutiny, and strict scrutiny means that a restriction on speech is permissible only if the limit is narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling governmental interest. And so a governmental interest might be not having our witnesses killed or not trying a case in the media. And so if it is narrowly tailored, okay, Donald Trump, you can talk, you can even talk about the judge, you can even talk about Jack Smith, but what you can't talk about are the witnesses, the jurors, the parties, the court staff, and you can't do it in the context of this case. So it's pretty narrow. For example, Donald Trump can still talk about Mike Pence and say Mike Pence is a bum for not endorsing me, but he can't go after Mike Pence as a witness in this case. So it's narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling governmental interest. You know, for the same reason you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? That's what that comes back to, because we have a compelling interest in protecting the public safety. And if you yell fire, we're going to have bedlam and people are going to be running around and people might be injured. Same thing, it is permissible for Congress to make it a crime to communicate a threat. If I threaten to kill somebody, that's a crime. If I commit fraud through speech, hey, you want to buy some real estate in Florida? All I did was speak. You're violating my First Amendment rights. No. So there are a lot of crimes that are committed only through speech, but because they are narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling governmental interest, they survive. So that's the test. So when people say it's a violation of my First Amendment rights to gag this or to stop that, well, not every restriction on speech is a violation. And so I think we could come up with ways to prevent threats and harassment and other things online, as long as it's narrowly tailored to achieve those compelling governmental interests, including, you know, fake cures for COVID that might kill somebody.
Does the First Amendment protect lies?
Protect
Lies.
lies. Oh,
I'm looking at defamation
well,
law, for instance.
yeah. So no, I mean, so there's some exceptions. So you can't lie under oath. That's perjury. You can't lie to a law enforcement agent. That's a crime. That's like a false police report. And if you defame someone, it's not a crime, but it is illegal under civil defamation laws. And so if you lie and harm someone's reputation deliberately, you can be sued for money damages. And that's what we've seen with E. Jean Carroll, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, Dominion voting systems. So that is another exception to free speech rights. There are limits.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Those great questions. And Barb, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
I highly recommend all of you go out and buy this book. I think it's essential reading for every one of us, and share it widely. Politics and Prose offering a 10% discount for, you know, if you go to their website, there's a discount code special 10, and you can use that to get a discount from them. And
may I offer something else too?
Sure, absolutely.
If you buy it from Politics and Prose, I also have book plates that, you know, it's a little sticker that looks very nice. It has the logo of the book that I have been signing for people. If you want a signed book plate that you can paste in your book, if you email me your mailing address, I will mail you, and I'll even pay for the stamp. You just have to promise to buy my book. So I'm gonna put my let's see, I think I can put my email address in the chat. Here it is. I'm
Yes.
putting it in the chat right now. So it's bmcquade@umich.edu. Did it show up there?
It did.
Okay, so that's my email address. If you want a signed book plate, I would be very happy to sign it. I'll put whatever you want in there, unless it's, nothing obscene or threatening. But, if you want me to say to Tazeen, all my love, Barbara McQuade, I'll do it. So just email me what you want with your mailing address, and I will be very happy to send you a book plate that you can paste into the book.
That is a very generous offer. Thank you. And I
Oh,
need
you're
one for
very
my
kind
book.
to
It's
invite
up
me,
on
so
the
it's least I
bookshelf
can do.
already. So I will be sending you my address.
Very good.
So thank you, Barbara. Before I close, I just want to remind people of some just our upcoming events. Once again, we have an event happening on the 18th of April. That is going to be with Sarah Bloom Raskin. And we're going to be talking about climate, the environment, and net zero. It's going to be at Las Chorras restaurant at 6:30. So please register. It should be a really great event. And the second event that we really would like you to come and really push it out there for everyone is the D6 forum that we're having. It's Democratic congressional candidates, moderated by Brian Karam. It's on the 28th of April. That's a Sunday from 2:30 to 5 at Seneca Valley High School. So please, once again, the links to register in the chat. They're also on our website. Check us out. And with that, I'd like to close the meeting, but go back to Barbara. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you join us today. Thank you for your time. And
for the
next time
invitation.
you're in town, maybe we'll see you in person. But thank
Very
you.
good. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Come back
everyone.
to town. Come back.
Good night. Thank you.
Yes.